Keith, I'll do the podcast under one condition.
Yes.
I don't do it as a co-host. I don't do it as your friend. I do it as your son.
Or, I thought you were going to say Parma guy.
You know, there's something about respecting the beat, Keith.
We have never once in our entire time doing this.
It wouldn't be very on brand.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Keith and Mike Watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's very dark in here. Can we turn
I
the
wonder why that didn't... I know why. Go ahead.
Okay. So today we are... we are all distracted, and I'll tell you why. It's because we're so freaking excited to talk about Season 5, Episode 14 in Purgatory's Shadow. This is my dad, Mike Indeglio. He's also my Parma guy. Mm-hmm. We are going to be talking about this episode. Mike, how you doing?
You know, it's funny, Keith. A couple weeks ago, tangent is beginning right at the top. A couple weeks ago, we got a little lambasted because, we kept saying everybody should have a guy, a guy that has access. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. And we said, maybe you don't need a guy. However, I recall my first job, Keith, was at a place called Angelo's Pizza. All right? Mm-hmm. There's two things that I remember, many things, many memories, great stories, but apropos to this, what we're talking about is, wait till you hear about how far around the block I'm going for this. So stupid. Oh,
wow.
So everybody came there for the bread. Get some comfortable
shoes, everybody.
We had a special place we sourced bread, and he wouldn't tell anybody where he got his bread because he didn't want to give up the secret. He also did that with his mozzarella cheese and the grated Parmesan that would come in. We had a special guy where we'd get his Parmesan and his Romano, right? His cheese guy. So some would say we had a Parma guy.
So worth it. We went through the wormhole to another quadrant, all the way back. 100% worth it for the Parma guy. No. Oh my God. Well, let me tell you, this episode in Purgatory Shadow has been one that I have been looking forward to for a very long time, and primarily the one you heard me screaming about spoilers for the last 2 seasons. It was this reveal that I did not want people to give away. People were starting to drop little hints. Oh, is this Arbashir? What's happening?
Yeah, I was oblivious.
So totally honestly, you did not know about 100%. That twist.
0%.
Okay, cool.
That, yeah. In fact, as I was doing this, went back for the screenshots, I started to watch him, and he is Bashir, for as much crap as we give Siddig, as much crap as and I think he deserves it sometimes, he's playing a part, and he's doing it. There are subtle things in there. I went back and watched. He's doing subtle stuff, but it's not mustache twirly, and it's well done. In fact, I can't wait to discuss how he feels about them going, Cisco's decision to send people over there. What was the plan? I can't wait to talk about it. Yeah,
we've so much to talk about. It's so much fun. So the moment, obviously, spoiler alert. After screaming at everybody for spoilers, so as not to spoil Mike's reaction to this moment. Obviously, we're going to talk about the twist here, but there's a lot of interesting stuff behind the scenes in terms of when did Siddig know about this. So there's lots to talk about. I'm excited to get into it, and this is only part 1. So it's going to be awesome. But before we get into it, we have to talk about last week's episode for the uniform, and so we're going to talk about your ratings and reviews of this episode. Mike, if you folks wanted me to read their comment right here on the show, how would they do that?
Keith, I'll say it quickly. You can leave us a super thanks here on YouTube. You could also become a subscriber to the K&M Patreon page at patreon.com/K&M. Listen, you get some great stuff over there. I'm not going to deny it. You get access to all of our paywall stuff, like me watching Deep Space Nine. You also get access to other amazing patrons. And mostly you're just saying thanks and helping us offset our time that we put into the show. We appreciate it, and one of the ways we say thank you is by reading a select bunch of comments at the beginning of the episode, because what you have to say is actually much more interesting and insightful than what we have to say.
By a factor of a lot. So, last week's For the Uniform, Joshua Cronin says, I enjoy the Eddington story because it allows us to see a different side of Sisko. He is complex, and I love it. It shows he's badass and destroys that planet. Is Sisko perfect? No. But we love him. And we know what's in him. Keith, Season 7, indeed. I, too, really enjoyed the manual departing of the Defiant. It was intense and very satisfying to watch. The Maquis aren't the best plot line, but they did it on Voyager, so they did it so Voyager could have a start. My brain isn't good today.
It's okay.
And since Voyager can't finish it, because they're in the Delta Quadrant, Deep Space Nine has to. I'm glad we're getting a close to them. Now, I wouldn't say, we're closing that chapter a little bit here.
Gotcha.
Now, I wouldn't say it's among my top favorites, but I will give it 80 self-sealing stem bolts because it has some strong points I like. One of our newest patrons, Brian from Video Game Drive-By. Go subscribe to Brian's Video Game Drive-By channel right here on the YouTube. Does a very similar thing to what we do, just playing video games with his buddy. Really fun.
Love it.
Brian says, happy to be here, still working through the series, and literally is commenting on all of the old videos. It's really, really fun to watch. It is
awesome to watch, yeah.
And get all of your thoughts on all the previous episodes. Still working through this series, and I'm so excited for what's coming. Nothing better than enjoying this series through someone else's eyes. I'll be moving in with my girlfriend sometime in the near future, and she's decided she will do a Deep Space Nine watch as though it was watch through as soon as we get a new place. Motivation. I'm excited to see her reactions too. Congratulations on... There's multiple levels of congratulations. One, congratulations on moving in with your girlfriend. Fantastic. But I think more, congratulations on getting a girlfriend who was willing to watch Deep Space Nine with you. I think... honestly, sitting down for 7 seasons of sci-fi might be more of a commitment than moving in. But anyway, congratulations. I'm envious.
It's the rise of fledgling relationships here on Earth, Keith, perhaps?
Could be. I like my brain rattling. How can I make a joke of like Horgon, Ryza?
I should have gone Netflix and chill, but like Deep Space and chill, and I could have done a lot of things.
Yeah, just look at some point. All right, here's what you should do, Brian. Get a Horgon and put it on the table. Don't tell her what it is until she'll discover it during that episode. That'll be fun. Anyway.
I mean, you've got a lot of explaining to a lot of people. Do you have a lot of visitors? Because if so, that Keith's plan might be bad.
I mean, that's true. I mean, most people are going to have no idea what that is, but somebody's going to like, okay. That's upsetting. YouTube viewer says, as I desperately try to bail from this conversation, says, I don't know how you ended up talking about human sausage. Fair. Ethical issues of cannibalism aside, I can't believe this is a comment that actually makes sense based on our previous episode. I imagine human sausage is full of microplastics, mercury, and who knows what other toxins.
It's sort of like the Jersey Shore.
Human bodies are basically the Jersey Shore.
Microplastics.
You might step on a needle.
Yeah.
It's a good chance. As for Shakar as a love interest, I don't know if it's the actor playing Shakar or the writing for his character, but I always thought he was kind of bland. If nothing else, he is quite tall, and that's a huge factor in a man's attractiveness towards women. The internet was in its infancy during the 1990s, but people were speculating online about Deep Space Nine as the episodes were coming out, until it was revealed that he was in the Maquis. It was widely speculated that Eddington was a changeling infiltrator.
I thought that I had that instinct as well. Like when he first did the flippy switch on Sisko way back.
Well, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Although I think it would have been a little obvious. But anyway.
Also, we'll get to it.
Go ahead.
No.
It also points out the difference between Next Gen Worf and Deep Space Nine Worf, which I thought was really funny. Next Gen Worf, I recommend we fire torpedoes. Captain Picard, no, let's try a diplomatic solution. Deep Space Nine Worf, I recommend we fire torpedoes. Captain Sisko's, no, wait until we attach weapons of mass destruction to them, then fire the torpedoes. If you want to avoid a war, you send Picard. But if you want to win a war, you send Sisko. I think that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Harry Pothead says, I give this one 50 self-sealing stem bolts. I think what's going on here is a bunch of writers showing how appreciative they were to create this group they didn't want to create. For a show that they're not going to work on, only to have that show treat this group with no consideration whatsoever. Then the producers of both shows come and say, it's your job to get rid of this group. So it was done, and not very enthusiastically from a story craft aspect. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because they were setting up Voyager, they sort of forced this story on to Deep Space Nine, and it felt, retroactively looking at it, it really did feel like a forced thing, and they sort of introduced it on Next Gen as well, and we're sort of like, it wasn't a particularly good enough setup to justify all the investment that we had in it on shows that aren't even the show it was setting up. Mm-hmm. And because of the structure of Voyager, because they're on the other side of the galaxy and there's no communication going back and forth, there isn't even ways to continue to tie it back to our heroes on Voyager. So it really does start to feel very tacked on at that point. I think you're right. Kevin Miles says, I give this episode 90 self-sealing stem bolts. Eddington is Sisko's Moby Dick. Eddington got one over on Sisko, and now Sisko needs to get even a glimpse of what is to come. Yeah, I think I said it last week, but this is exactly right. Moby Dick is the story we should have been telling, not Les Mis. That makes sense. That makes much more sense. But whatever. That's what we did. Hibernation Pod gives it a 70. Meritneath says, I think Sisko's problem is that Eddington betrayed him, not Starfleet. And worse, he tricked him successfully and made him look bad in the eyes of his superiors. Yeah. I think Sisko even says this in the episode For the Cause. Interestingly, in this scene, Odo was more occupied with the fact that Eddington was supposed to have an eye on him because Starfleet didn't trust the changeling than the real danger of possible undetected viruses. Yeah, I mean, like, was Odo bristling it so much that he was emotionally involved in that he wasn't seeing clearly? I think that's fair, too. Mysterious Anne says, welcome, Mysterious Anne. It's been a couple weeks. Nice to have you. Says 62 stem bolts from me, and it's high, and it's that high because there are parts I really like the way they showed them dealing with having to go manual on the Defiant. The level of battle chatter reminded me a little bit of some of the early original series episodes where you can tell Gene was drawing from his military flying experience. Gene was a pilot, and really going for that type of cadence and style. I wonder if they thought of Nog when they worked on how Uhura would manually route all of her communications through her in Subspace Rhapsody. Good point. I did not dawn on me, but it makes perfect sense. I have a visceral negative response to Eddington. It's so strong that I have trouble even watching this episode. Kai Wynn, in contrast, almost delights me with how perfectly evil she is. Even as I'm hating her and having an angry response to what she's saying, I get this little thrill of, wow, this is one of the most well-written, well-acted characters I've ever met. I don't think the show invested enough in the Eddington character for him to rise to that level. I agree. Walter really enjoyed the part of the watch-along that he got to be there for, and he overheard me listening to you guys and appreciated you pointing out that Valjean dies old and singing falsetto. It's been too long since
ironically, that might be me too. This weekend, I might die.
You might die. Old and singing falsetto.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all how we're going to go out if we play our cards right.
Yeah, if you can keep your falsetto to your old age, you've done well.
Oh, yeah. No, you could do it.
It's the first thing that goes for me when I'm tired.
Does it really? Mm-hmm. The falsetto is the only thing that doesn't go. For me, it's the mix that goes. But it goes when I get nervous. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it's been too long since I interacted with Les Mis for me to comment on this, but Walter pointed out that Valjean not only doesn't sacrifice himself, he sets up other people to sacrifice themselves. It was an odd choice to go for illusion-wise.
Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, they must have thought the Moby Dick Ahab was getting too overdone in Trek. That's true, because it is a little bit Star Trek 2, which we have to do our watch-along with. Anyway, you guys were a bit hard on yourselves in the beginning. I think this episode of Kanan was great. I laughed very hard at Mike's just a couple trees defense. Oh man, I did not think about the life on the planet that was impacted by Cisco and not evacuated, plants and animals, etc. I appreciated both Keith's strong nudge to remind us all to be less human and humanoid-centric, and also the grace and humor from you both that reflects how hard it is to overcome that human-centric world view. There's a recent-ish episode of Woman at Warp podcast about native perspectives on the Maquis that dovetails really nicely with a lot of what you guys brought up in your conversation, especially Keith's insight about rage and ego being central to both Eddington and Cisco in this episode, but not on purpose or handled well, unfortunately. See, some people like that point. Maquis was a very interesting idea, but they seem to have mostly approached it from the point of view of the Empire and been unable to muster up any real empathy for the freedom fighters. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. They wrote it from Starfleet's perspective, and they were never able to really articulate the Maquis' point of view in a way that was like emotionally and logically cohesive. I think. So it's hard to hook into.
But the episode suffers because the interesting potential point is I think Ben's. What is his motivation? Why is he angry? Everything okay? Are we listening?
Heard some sort of alarm outside.
Oh, that's alarming.
Indeed. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's Ben's. Is he furious with Eddington from a personal standpoint? Will that conflict? Will that, all those questions that raises would have been an interesting episode, but we don't really explore any of that stuff. It's just a failed illusion. I think Walter's point that it's a failed illusion is sort of where we come down on this whole thing.
Yeah. Agreed. Well played, Walter. Yeah. I can see there's a musical theater kid in you. I love it.
Also, while we're talking about Mysterious Anne, I have failed you. I know that you are the one patron who wants the watch-alongs as an audio podcast as well. I used to do that for you, and I have subsequently forgotten because you've been so great on your popping into the watch-alongs, so I figured you didn't need them later down the line. So I will get back to doing that for you, I guess now.
Great.
Now that I've accounted myself online.
Great. Perfect. Okay, folks. It's time to get into this episode. Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 14, In Purgatory's Shadow, which aired on February 10th, 1997. Folks, Deep Space Nine was moving forward, throwing our story and empire, universe, changing things were happening, but there's nothing changing in the universe that means that my heart still does not need to be unbroken.
Unbreak this jail where original Bashir lives now with Garak and his dad gone. Oh my god, I forgot that he was blind in that scene, and I kept being like, oh, this is perfect. He can't even look at him. He can't even make eye contact. Someone in the chat was like, yo, he's blind.
He's blind.
Yeah, I was like, that. Sorry.
But it is true. Both are true at the same time.
That was a cool twist too. Apropos of nothing, but it colors in so much other stuff from other episodes.
But it makes sense though. It really is the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, frankly. It was like a forced loyalty.
Yeah. The top movie was Star Wars Special Edition Week 2. Took in another $24 million. So if our top song and our top movie were not new, what was new on TV this week?
A lot, Keith. And let me tell you, one of the hardest things I do every week is to look at that TV Tango page and try to find something interesting to talk about. And let me tell you, this week, nothing. There is nothing of interest to discuss. And thus, let's move forward.
Okay, well, what a segment, folks. Patreon.com/KNM.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes time saved is the friends we made along the way. I don't know. I had something I was brewing. It just didn't go.
Time saved is the friends you made along the way. That needs to be a t-shirt, folks. Time saved is the friends you met along the way. Mike and Deglio. Wow.
Some of my finest work is in not doing the thing.
What was Voyager doing? They were doing the episode Unity, which I will speak no more of for spoilers.
Okay.
Because, we're going to watch this next, so I can't give anything away.
Ooh, you won't even let me watch next week this week, so
No!
The rate our beards are going, Keith, we are going to be old as hell by the time we get to Voyager.
Oh, dude, I was looking, forget exactly why. I was looking for a link it was a sound clip that I was looking for from Out of Practice. This was like 5 years ago. We look like we had a rough 5 years between then and now, and that was like at the height of COVID.
Jen was catching up on this podcast, and she was like, "Oh my God, look how white your hair is!" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I know. Thank you." It's red right now because it's like doing this transition thing. So,
well, there it is. The Weekly World News headline, folks. We got a virus. That's not.
I didn't change it. I'm gonna do it in real time, folks. Yeah.
Folks, actually, of all the things on Weekly World News headline that is actually plausible and concerning, a Mars rock virus infects the U.S. As we had a meteor fly over and cause a sonic boom over New Jersey yesterday morning. We heard it. It was really quite something.
Oh.
Yeah, if we ever come across an extraterrestrial virus...
I'll tell you this much, Keith. There's one thing on this page that is 100% actually true. Factually true.
Mm-hmm.
Read the first couple words.
No American is safe, warns Center for Disease Control.
You can just stop at no American is safe and let's move forward.
Yeah, it's been a week. If you're wondering why my brain is dead and Mike's not sleeping and why we look rough, it's been a rough week. Okay, in the real world. Check your dates, folks. Okay, so this episode, let's go back in time to the future.
Please.
This episode was directed by Gabrielle Beaumont. This is her only episode of Deep Space Nine. Also did an episode of Voyager and I believe some of Next Generation. It was written, not surprisingly, they brought in the big kids for this episode. Written by Robert Hewitt Wolf and showrunner Ira Stephen Bear. Let's do some trivial trivia, shall we?
I can't wait.
Now Keith wastes your time.
Sure does.
With trivial trivia.
2, 3, 4, 9.
Look, you chose to listen and or watch, so you're having your time wasted by yourself.
Yeah, really. Sometimes, Keith, the time you waste is the friends you made along the way. Okay? I'm really gonna make it stick somehow. I'm gonna give you a couple different line reads through the day and see if we can get one that works.
We're gonna need a t-shirt. This is definitely the first Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine t-shirts. All right, so trivial trivia. So this episode, and you'll see from the opening slide here, is dedicated to the late Derek Garth, who was a grip, who was working on the show, who was killed in a car accident well on his way to the filming of this very episode.
Ooh.
Ira Stephen Bear commented that Garth was the most positive person on the set. So, very sad. This is Melanie Smith's first appearance as Zial, after the character had been portrayed by 2 different actresses in previous installments. I don't know the backstory there, why they kept switching, but this is our final version of Zial, for everyone keeping track at home.
So, I'm easily distracted, and...
What?
Even with all the context I have, here's the Zial thing. There is no, aside from just like plot points that you can't change, there's been, I think, my opinion, no portrayal, visual, or Really, those two things: the portrayal and the look of the character. There was no consistency, and so by the time we get here to number 3, oh, and age. That's the third thing, right?
Right.
So those 3 things, I literally had to ask everyone we were watching the show with yesterday.
Who is this?
Who is this person? I mean, I put it together finally, but like the way the whole thing, the very little consistency for me.
Well, and I think she continued to age up. I don't know if they were actually older, but like the character seemed to age up to make this crush on Garak seem less creepy. Mm-hmm. Which I think I eventually in this episode was like, oh, I get what's happening, and that was fine.
This
with
was
that.
the least creepy of the
least creepy version of it. So I bet the first one was, oh, we're gonna tell a story. We're gonna treat her as an adult, but she looks like 15. That's not gonna work.
Let me ask you this question, and you can just, am I ever gonna care about her, that character, or that arc, or anything happening? Are they ever gonna like throw me a story that is like worth caring about?
I think so.
The first episode, I would say that episode, I think I remember liking, at least my recollection, with when Dukat went on the mission with Kira to find her. But I liked that one, but subsequent to that, I've never really appreciated it.
Yeah, she kind of like represents some flavor of innocence in a way that it's more about how she is being handed off by her various caretakers. But yeah, we're gonna see more. We're gonna see more.
Okay.
So we'll see. I don't know. So Kathy DeBono appears as the Breen prisoner, both here and in By Inferno's Light, next episode. She would later appear as a Klingon in Blaze of Glory and in the Cards, and the recurring role of Impella, the Dabo girl, throughout seasons 6 and 7. I believe as a background or an actor. I don't know. But obviously good to work with, because they keep bringing you back and casting is a whole bunch of different stuff. And was willing to lie there frozen as a Breen for this entire episode. Probably could have just used a body, but
I mean, once
whatever.
You paid for a day rate, might as well just have them just lay there.
Yeah, there you go. Julian Bashir actor Alexander Siddig, this is one that I find the most interesting, was not informed that his character had been replaced by a changeling for over a month until he received the script for this episode. He complained to the producers, telling them that if he'd known he was playing an imposter, he'd have adjusted his performance accordingly. But that was why he was not informed. The changeling was meant to be such a good imposter that no one would notice any difference in Bashir at all. And I think that was really smart. For the same reason, like, I'm yelling at everybody, don't drop any weird hints about this to Mike. I don't want, and when we get there, I'll describe me and everyone else who was there live staring at the screen at Mike's face when this happened for the first time.
You'd almost think, I know that we had that whole episode on, I think it was Earth, right? Where we went to see Ben's dad. That was still Earth, right?
Yeah.
Where we sort of discussed the sort of post 9/11 of it all, right? After we found out about the changelings and the blood screenings, and we sort of had made that point, and I think that's a fair point. However, if you do remember post 9/11 America, it lasted for a long time. I mean, even to this day, only recently can you keep your shoes on at the airport if you have TSA Plus pre-check. So it's weird to me still that like the main, most important people on the station, on these ships, aren't doing at least weekly or bi-daily blood screenings for the changeling of it all.
Well, I think we found that the blood screenings don't work.
Well, we did have that scene, right? When they were in the office of that dude somewhere.
Yeah, well, because we were using blood screenings to do it, and then we found out that Martok had been replaced because he figured out how to fake a blood screening.
Right. So then, why in the prison cell do they do a blood screening? Is that just the best they have to approximate?
It's the best they have. I mean, that's the best they can do.
Yeah.
And also the Martok in that, who's been there for 2 years, doesn't know that his replacement found a way to get around the blood screening.
Mm-hmm. That was cool, man. That first reveal with the Martok of it was cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I thought about it subsequently because because I'd forgotten that it worked out this way, how much I thought, oh my, it's Martok. I'm so excited to see Martok. And then, like, he dies. Mm-hmm. And then, like, oh, wait. It's a bit of a...
I just assumed it was, like, previous Martok stuff, right? Like, that he had been a badass in other series or whatnot, and that's why we were all pumped for him.
Yeah. Anyway, so there are 2 pieces of trivial trivia that I am adding. I'm not pulling it from IMDb or anything else because I noticed not 1, but 2 production mistakes in this episode. The first one is right there in the first scene. You can go and watch it as Kira and Odo exit after they get the distress signal. Kira almost walks right into the door because it does not open fast enough. And so you see her like walk, does one of these things. But it was at the end of a long shot where they had all their dialogue and then they exit, and I think that was just the best take, and they didn't want to do that from a production thing. And secondly, when Garak is heading out to the airlock to try to leave the first time, you can see the reflection of the camera and the camera guy in the glass on the airlock.
Oh, interesting.
Probably neither one of these particularly noticeable when you weren't AI upscaled and watching it on a 65-inch TV, which didn't even exist at that point.
Right.
But 2 things that I noticed you can go back and check. It's kind of interesting and fun. Mike, you want to know who else is interesting and fun?
Oh, Keith, I thought you would never ask. Keith, that might be our patrons. I mentioned earlier in the show what they receive, but right now they receive our thanks. Bryant, Kimball, Beersock, Peter Bank, Frank Wrench, Quark's Bar, Yanba, welcome. Yanba, welcome, one of our newest top-tier patrons. We appreciate you joining us. Joshua Cronin, Ryan Chesley, Merritt Neath, Andrew Hayes, Allen, and the mysterious Worf's big old boot shivs. Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, CRM Productions, Nikolai Ivanovich, Lobachowski, Delusions, when? At noon. YouTube viewer joining us on we had so many, we did the watch along that we do every week, generally every week, as I watched the episode for the first time. And we had so many, we did it an earlier time yesterday, and we had so many new friends from the patron join us on the watch along that haven't been in the chat before. It was so great to see all of you. That included YouTube viewer James Hubbard, Hibernation Pod, Miri, Holcomb, Brian from Video Game Drive-By. Welcome to the patrons. JD Makes, hey, glad that you got your
power back.
And friends, JD was going through it down there in Texas, and he and his channel could use some help. So he's asked. We're going to provide a link in the show notes today. If you can spare a bit, we'll link to his video and his ask, and you can take it from there. Thanks, JD. We appreciate you, and hopefully some of our patrons can give back. Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, CRM, Pat, Joshua Cronin, JD, Lutz Kremer, Wyatt Eldridge, and Andreas. Appreciate all of you. Keith, we're going a different way, though. This is not all. We want to say an extra thank you because we've been talking about it, and I'll let you take the lead on this, buddy.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about how to thank the people who are not necessarily currently active patrons, but people who have been unbelievably generous with their support over the years, going back to other shows. So if you have contributed in your lifetime $100 to the K&M Empire, you will join permanently the K&M Patron Hall of Fame. And that includes these incredible people: Casey Clark, Brian Kaufman, Jason Moe, Joshua Cronin, the Mysterious Anne, Andrew Hayes, Worf's Big Ol' Boot Shivs, Jennifer Massanova, way back from the Out of Practice podcast, Cloud Lover 69 Classic, Jorge Novoa, Charles Babbage, and Bryant Kimball Beersack. There's some other folks who are just on the precipice of joining this. If you're afraid that your name might show up here, you better cancel soon. But we want to permanently thank these incredible people who have been so supportive to the channel and make our days much easier.
Yeah, when we first even pitched the Patreon idea, because this is a lot of work, and we weren't trying to get rich, we're just trying to help ourselves out. We never thought you guys would be such a great community, and so from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. And if there's ever anything we can do to improve, or suggestions you have, or things we've said that have upset you, please let us know. Send us an email. You can do always keithandmikeentertainment@gmail.com.
Yeah, always happy to hear from you. And like with what JD's going through right now, patroning doesn't have to only go in one way. So if we ever can do you a favor, let us know.
Yeah, hit us up.
For sure. Okay, so our guest stars this week on In Purgatory Shadow include, of course, Andrew Robinson as Garak, Mark Alaimo as Gul Dukat, Melanie Smith as Zial, J.G. Hertzler's back as Martak, James Horan is Ikak, and Paul Dooley as Enabran Tain. Boy, it is like almost the entire legendary Hall of Fame cast of guest actors all in one episode. Really, really fun. What do you say we go into our screening room and get into it?
Keith, what do you say next week for the Hall of Fame? We get some trumpet B-roll or some like fanfare.
Yes, I was thinking that.
Yeah. See what I can do.
We can reuse, recycle from the Out of Practice podcast. We have some of that. Okay, that won't get us a YouTube strike.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Right. All right, here we go. Buckle up. In Purgatory's Shadow, Kira is helping Odo return his quarters into shapeshifter mode. He's removing his bed and putting his sculpture garden back. Nana holds her back, still recovering from childbirth, but it is not mentioned. I bet that was a Nana choice because she's like, I just had a kid. You don't just bounce back immediately. You still gotta feel it for a while. She discovers a book called Finding and Winning Your Perfect Mate. Odo is embarrassed, but Kira totally gets it and does not make it weird. And she reminds him that he can still seek love and go into the Bone Zone as a shapeshifter. And I thought the way she tactfully handled that was like really, really well done. And like didn't go, ooga, ooga, it's like, yeah, of course you do. Because like it's clear the implication there is like it's sex that he's looking for. It's like, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? It's good.
He would just have to approximate the human aroused form, right? Or I guess he could do actually I'm not even, this sounds like I'm making a bit, but it's not. I'm just thinking like as a lover, he's actually got more at his disposal, right? Because he can.
He certainly does. He can be whatever.
He doesn't need a drawer of like apparati. He can
be anything.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, like he could also be different people, different sizes, different shapes. He can be anything. I mean, it's kind of like banging a holodeck. Or like a holosuite. Like Odo's like the perfect mate. Let's be honest. But I wonder, like, all right, we're already here. Do shapeshifters have erogenous zones?
Yeah, like I guess I mean the sex thing, yeah, but I guess he doesn't eat anymore, right? Like he just found out he liked some foods, so now so in being restored to his previous state, he did. Right. There was some sacrifice to that. He did lose.
Like do they have the ability to have the same sort of experiential experience that we do?
Well, I'm sure that as a being, they must have some sort of. I don't know. I've never been a goo guy, so it's tough.
I've never been a goo guy. Yeah. Mike and Deglio. Very quotable today. Very quotable. Anyway.
Keith, sometimes silence is the goo guys you met along the way. What was it? What was the original quote? Now I've forgotten.
Sometimes silence is the goo guys you led away.
No, you met along the way. Yeah.
Oh, boy, gonna be a weird one, folks. Then Dax calls and says they just got a garbled message from the Gamma Quadrant. It's Cardassian, but there aren't any Cardassians in the Gamma Quadrant. And it's got a super complex code that they can't break without the help of Cardassian super spy, Garak. Now, I noted in this scene that there's this driving music under the dialogue that says, pay attention, this is big. So that when later Garak goes up to Bashir and Zial, now wearing her third face, and announces that there's nothing in the message, we all know it's a lie. Bashir wonders if there could have been any survivors from the Cardassian-Romulan fleet that got wiped out last season. But Garak says nope, and he's going back to work. Bashir and Ziyal can both tell he's lying immediately. Apparently he's out of practice. He had to practice with Worf later. And we find out that Ziyal finds Garak fascinating, and they've almost aged her up enough for it not to be creepy. Then, of course, we see Garak sneaking off to the airlock to steal a runabout. And when he gets to the cockpit, he finds Bashir there with a phaser, saying, "Going somewhere?" Great teaser, I think.
Great teaser. It's delighting. And what is great at this point is, yes, we knew he would get caught. He almost should have known he was going to get caught. But the little...
He probably did.
The fun... The thing that seemed like a toss away, but I thought was really wonderful here, nice little breadcrumb, is the little playful banter they have here where he's like, very good, because we know they've been having their little meals together and he's been trying to, like, let's say, coach up Bashir and to some... make him a little more... devious, if you will. And so it makes us further double down that, yes, not only is this Bashir, but it's a pre-established relationship, which I guess it has been too.
You feel the history of it,
right?
Which is very remarkable. Yeah, I've always wondered about how they are so good at this type of infiltration, but then we remember, right? The Search Part 2, where they spent time in everybody's brain. They literally brain scanned everybody, and so they clearly had access to their memories and feelings and emotions, and so that allowed them, and who knows, could they Matrix-style download all that information into the person? Who knows?
The only thing... we'll talk about it later, but, like, the only thing that would have made it just go from incredible to perfect is if we had been along for the episode where the swap happens. You know, like we could have, like, Sixth Sensed it, where if we had gone back, we could be like, that's the moment it happened. But instead, they sort of, like, he mentions that it happened off camera, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's tough because, especially with Star Trek fans, how closely they're dissecting everything, you know, you have a risk-reward there.
Yeah.
Right, because if it pays off, it's amazing. But if it gets out and undercuts what happens here, who knows? Excuse me. So, in Act 1, Garak says, "Doctor, I must remember to stop underestimating you. How did you know? You mean that you were lying about the contents of the message? You said you'd given up on finding Cardassian survivors in the Gamma Quadrant, but Ziyal's right. You're not the giving up sort. Very good, Doctor. You've come a long way from the naive man I met 5 years ago. You've become distrustful and suspicious. It suits you. I had a good teacher. What did the message say? It was a call from help from Enabran Tain. Tain, of course, led the Cardassian-Romulan invasion of the Dominion. He and everyone else was assumed dead. So Garak invites Bashir along the secret mission. But Bashir says, no, we're going to go talk to Sisko. And Sisko makes Garak explain how he knows the message is real. And he says most of it was identification code. The rest of it was just one word, alive, repeated over and over and over again, so it should be easy enough to triangulate the source. Now, this was a wormhole for me until we watched the watch along with Mike, where it dawned on me. I was like, how does just saying alive, alive, alive help you triangulate it? And I realized, oh, that's because it is continuing to repeat. It wasn't, the message got sent once, it just is continuing, it is going and going and going.
Yeah, it's Marconi in there, just like pop, 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 bing.
Anyway, so,
Ben looks like he's in a good mood about it.
Yeah, he is aware of the gravity of all of this. Garak says there may be all types of survivors being held, and Sisko reluctantly agrees to let him go, but with Worf. And we reinforce here that we are not just looking for the survivors, possible survivors of the Cardassian Romulan attack. There have also been Federation ships that have gone missing that I don't know if we've addressed before. And there was the new Bajor colony that got wiped out. So there's actually a fair amount of people who might have been, trapped there.
So just questions here. I don't know that there are particular answers. There are probably theories, but so clearly my read would be that the founders, this infiltrator specifically, did not intend for the prison messages to be sent. So this is not something that is a positive occurrence.
No.
Also, probably not interested in being the one chosen to go on the mission with Garak, because that would then remove him from the infiltration. Well, I guess not necessarily, could come back, but finding out that Worf's going, I guess at this point it's not bad, because they're probably assuming they can outsmart them, and if whoever they send will be killed or captured.
Well, right, because you're right. This is an interesting inflection point for the infiltrator, because you would think, okay, well, if I'm going out on this rescue mission with Garak one-on-one, I could just kill Garak and say, we got hit in the whatever. But I think knowing that the invasion fleet is, days away, he made the calculated idea that he was more valuable, could do more things still on the station than on the mission.
Question then becomes, does this move up their infiltration time schedule? Did it not change it at all? Has he already sabotaged the defense lasers, which is what seems to be one of his major...
I don't think he has. I think he is laying in wait on the station to make sure they don't do these things. So he's just waiting in a position to do whatever it takes to make sure the invasion force can get there, which is what he does. And so and
then how dangerous, dude, if during an invasion, you have all of these wounded and all of this stuff happening, that your doctor now is the one who is compromised.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And think about the calculated risk that he's making. A bunch of times he saved Sisko's life. He could have killed Sisko. He could have killed Odo. He could have killed anybody. Could have killed Kira during the birth. Lots of different ways that they could have died accidentally, and he could have found a way to cover it up. But I think, I bet this is true of a lot of infiltrators. Like, I could do this now, but my remaining here, it's not worth blowing my cover. It's not worth the risk.
So they're editing better than Eddington did.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, it's clear the Dominion does everything better than Eddington. Yeah. So, where was I? All right. So Dax is pissed at Worf for not telling her he was going on this suicidal mission, but it's mostly good-natured sparring. She takes his collection of Klingon operas as a way to motivate his return, because they're very valuable, these Klingon operas on the isolinear rods. He started out getting 12 for a penny, but then they just kept coming, and
but the way that Dax plays this scene, I don't know that those are the rods you're looking for. I mean, I think she is he's not missing the opera as much as the diva, if you will.
It's gonna be more making a deposit than a withdrawal.
Yeah, she's like, well, if you want to come back.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Anyway,
sing that high G.
Yeah, they kiss, and Dax says, "Have a glorious death, or don't. It's up to you." Worf smiles beside himself. Meanwhile,
some people find a girlfriend that let them watch Deep Space Nine. Others find a girlfriend who let them go do, life and death warfare.
Yeah. And some find a wife who merely tolerates doing the or is supportive, but, it tolerates doing the podcast. And some people get divorced. So, it's...
it takes all shapes, sizes, and colors, friends.
It sure does. Anyway, so meanwhile, Garak has a goodbye drink with Zial. It's clear that she has a crush on the gay drama teacher, and he tries to let her down gently. And this is finally where it makes sense to me, right? Because when we were trying to play this as a will they, won't they, I was like, oh, that's gross and weird. But now it's obvious she just has a crush on her teacher and is not picking up on the gaydar. and and he's trying to be nice about it or whatever. That dynamic makes perfect sense to me, and that does not feel uncomfortable at all. At least to me. So Zial says, "Why do you always make fun of my feelings for you? Perhaps because I find them a touch misguided." Point in case. Zial says, "Well, if that's what you think, then why do you spend so much time with me?" And I'm going to read the stage directions here because I think it's interesting. Garak sighs. He's not used to talking about his real feelings about anything, but he really doesn't have the heart to lie to the girl. And Garak says, "Because I'm exiled, alone, and a long way from home. And when I'm with you, it doesn't seem so bad." And, yeah, I mean,
it's a great line, too, though, because if and let me tell you, I have been, in that place where you don't want to hear what you don't want to hear, and you only want to hear what you want to hear, I can get enough from that line to fuel me.
Well, there's still a chance.
This, yeah.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly right. But then,
Mike, stop calling me. So email you.
Yeah. I can email. Yeah, exactly.
I've been there.
Send a pic of my isolinear rod.
Come on now.
I can't believe people do that. I'm too old to understand. Anyway, Ducat shows up.
Let me tell you, I don't want to do it either. It has nothing to do with my age.
I just say, like, you could have done it now. You could have done it when there was like a flip phone where it was like 320 pixels by 240, but now it's just too much.
Like I find a lot about, we don't have to get into it. Forget it. Different show.
Anyway, Ducat shows up. He's pissed at Garak for hanging out with his daughter. He holds Garak over a ledge until Quark comes and bails him out. He leaves, and Ducat... Polian! Fan! He leaves, and Ducat explains that he's here for repairs and to visit Zial. So then, Sisko sets Worf to the task of the mission. Sisko says, "Remember, this is a reconnaissance mission. You're to avoid the Dominion ships at all cost. I want you back in one piece." "What about Garak?" "I'd like him back too. I don't suppose I need to tell you to keep a close eye on him."
Best line.
At the first sign of betrayal, I will kill him, but I promise to return the body intact." I assume that was a joke. We'll see. Great. Such a great Worf moment.
No notes.
And we've talked about this sort of before, but the difference between the good episodes and the great episodes are little moments like that. I mean, obviously the big giant story arcs are great, but just to have the little beats like that be so satisfying and add so much, that's where that's good writing. I mean, that's great writing versus good writing. Because otherwise it would be like you get the plot point in, right? Keep an eye on Garak, but you might have a joke, but it's never going to land quite as tied to the character and with all the history. That's where the good stuff happens. So in Act 2, Garak and Worf zoom off in the runabout. Garak tortures Worf by trying to get him to sponsor his application to Starfleet. He gives a speech about redemption and Worf finally agrees. Then Garak escalates until Worf realizes he's teasing him. And Garak says, great line, "Lying is a skill like any other. If you want to maintain a level of excellence, you have to practice constantly." Another great line.
But in retrospect, Keith, I'm looking back at this scene and I'm thinking, because there's sort of a manic nature to Garak here in this scene, and I get he's kind of effing with Worf, and I get that he probably is practicing, like flexing his deceiving muscles, but I actually think he's nervous.
Sure, of course.
And I think he's got the kind of jitters, and he's just, you've all been there where you got a big gig the next day, and you just got to get, you're just like
babbling. Yeah.
Yeah.
We see a lot of vulnerability from Garak here, and it's so subtle. It's always right around the edges, because Garak is so good at hiding his vulnerability.
Keith, you know that me and Andrew Robinson are like personal friends?
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's a friend of the show. He's come on the show.
Yeah, he's come on the show, but he's spoken to me pretty directly.
Oh, he sure did. He knew your name. He knew your whole thing.
I mean, you've exchanged goods and services with him, but
I have exchanged goods and services for him. Yeah, I mean, I can make a friend for Mike, but I do have to pay.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that qualifies as symbiotic.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So back on the station, Dukat complains to Kira about allowing Ziyal to hang out with Garak. He is, however, okay with her being exposed to Bajoran religion, although he is condescending about it. But he understands it's part of the culture, which is interesting. Dukat, always like a layer. Everything is, you're undercutting the good with the bad. You're undercutting the bad with the good. Interesting. Dukat is mad, but Kira tells him to piss off. Save your excuses, Major. You've betrayed me, and I promise I won't forget it. If that's a threat, I'm not impressed. There was a time when Bajorans took Cardassian threats very seriously. Not anymore.
Keith, he's painting with a broad brush and making things black and white, and he's exhibiting all the signs of a classic narcissist. I highly recommend therapy for Gul Dukat.
But for Gul Dukat? Yeah. I think Gul Dukat would break his therapist.
Yeah, true. But
you need to bring in, one of the big guns, because he is so messed up. So, on the runabout, Worf has decided to turn back. The signal is coming from deep in Dominion space, but of course Garak talks him into staying. But traveling through a nebula, which will hide them. And Garak's manipulation of Worf here is so smart, because he uses Worf's honor to motivate him. And he knows right where Worf's weak spots are. So they head into the nebula, then trouble. They have run directly into a giant fleet of Jem'Hadar warships, including some new big giant ones we've never seen before. Not good.
That's an uh-oh face.
That is an uh-oh face. That's the appropriate face. So, in Act 3, they are naturally well outnumbered and well outgunned. And Worf knows they have to run long enough to get a message back to Deep Space Nine. Because this is obviously an invasion fleet, and they need to warn them. So, they head off being attacked, and they think they may have gotten the message out, but then they are, of course, caught and boarded. Back on the station, Dax and Kira discuss the baby for a while when the distress signal comes in and Sisko arrives and we get it. The attack is imminent. And Kira says we've lost contact with 2 listening posts. Sisko says warn Starfleet, and then sends Kira in the Defiant into the wormhole to figure out what's happening. And Kira says, and if there is an invasion fleet on the way, then get back here as soon as possible. And God help us all. So, Mike, what was your feeling when we saw the invasion fleet?
Well, I mean, the only spoiler I've had, right, is I have this one friend, God bless. They don't watch the show, mind you. They were so excited when we started the show. They're like, oh, we love Deep Space Nine. I was like, oh, you should watch along. You just listen. They're like, okay, and then they never do. Yeah. CEO Jen, how you doing? Where are you going? Are you going to Pep Boys? All right, that's a little production meeting. Yeah.
Woo!
Oh, I'm mad at Pep Boys, but that's a different story for a different podcast. So, but all they've said is, did you get to the Dominion War yet? Did you get to the Dominion War? And then when we met the founders, I thought that was the start of it. And we had some pewdies and some shooties, but never really kind of went full bore. Kind of been brinksmanship style. This felt like, okay, we're midway through season 5, a little bit past midway. There's only 2 seasons left. All the chess pieces are set. At some point, we need to fire it off. And it felt like people's anticipation of this 2-parter. I was like, when I saw that screen, I thought maybe this is it.
Well, we're going to find out. We don't necessarily know yet.
We don't know yet. This is badass.
Oh, it's such a cool set. And one of the things that Deep Space Nine does well is it plays with height on their sets. And now it's obviously more expensive to build up as opposed to out, but it makes such a big difference with shots like this. So, meanwhile, Worf and Garak are taken to a giant Jem'Hadar prison on an asteroid. And this, in the stage directions here, they describe what this is, which I think tells us some important information that is good to know. says this is a domed-over area on the asteroid's surface. It serves as the central area prison yard for a Dominion internment center. The Dominion isn't big on prisons, or in taking prisoners for that matter. This facility is for an elite group of POWs, people who the Dominion is especially curious about. And we don't say that in the episode, but I think it's really good to know why this exists and why these people are here. So Garak begins babbling to the first guard, and I hate these names, says, "This is Internment Camp 371. You are here because you are enemies of the Dominion. There is no release, no escape, except death." And that's the end of Act 3. We go back to the station, and the wormhole opens, and the Defiant returns right away. Sisko says, "Major, what did you find?" Just one word: trouble. On the promenade, Dukat tells Ziyal she needs to leave and go to Cardassia. He's heard about the Dominion fleet heading for the wormhole. He wants her to leave the station for her own safety. Little Casablanca here. So, on the prison asteroid, Worf and Garak are shown their barracks. Ikakataka says, "You will be sheltered in Barrack 6. You are free to move about the compound. But remember, beyond the atmospheric domes, there's nothing but airless vacuum and barren rock. Leave the dome even for an instant and you die." He says he's been waiting for another Klingon, which means there's already a Klingon here for some reason.
Did they do another pass at the Jem'Hadar? Because they look so much more badass in this episode. Like, their makeup is better, their masks are better. It just looks better.
I don't...
Maybe because it was going to be a lot more... Or maybe just the AI upscale worked better this time around.
It could be the lighting. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, they're all a little bit different. So, this, like, the forehead thing he's got going on here, I don't think I've seen before.
This guy's badass is what I'm saying.
Total badass. So, we find this other Klingon. And it's none other than General Martok fighting a Jem'Hadar person in a fighting pit. He loses, but then the fight is stopped. Garak and Worf help him get up. And, interestingly, this is actually the first time they've met. Because all the other Martoks we have seen previously have been the Changeling Infiltrator. And this Martok has lost an eye while here in the prison.
Interesting thought just popped into my head because of the slip of tongue there. You said Martoks plural, and I thought to myself, if we are to believe that the Great Goo Ocean, the Great Link, kind of is sort of like a Borgian, a biological Borgian supercomputer connection between them, like intranet. And it seems pretty easy for them to infiltrate. It's not necessarily always the same infiltrator, right? Like, you could trade off. You could Freaky Friday who is playing Martok. They could, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you would be passing off that information back.
No, I mean, they could do a whole room full of Martoks if they wanted to.
Yeah. So it's not like you just kill that one. You could kill that one infiltrator. They could still...
And now you can't make another Martok. Yeah, sure you can.
Yeah.
Hey, you can make as many as you want.
It's actually better than a clone, right? Because they're infinite.
Right, exactly. Now, of course, getting the information, like that much, but starting off, you can definitely do that. We find out that Martok has been here for 2 full years, which is, that's not good. But he knows of Worf and Garak. Worf, of course, is famous, and we find out why he knows Garak. He brings them to their bunks where they find a dying Enabran Tain. Tain is glad that his message got through, but is disappointed to find out that there is no rescue coming. And Tain says, "You allowed yourself to be taken prisoner. I taught you better than that. Living on that station has dulled your wits." Garak says, "That's it? After I've come all this way, after all I've been through, that's all you have to say to me?" "What do you want me to say?" "That I want you to say, 'Thank you, Elam. Your loyalty is most gratifying. I knew I could count on you.'" "But I couldn't count on you, could I?" All you have done is doom us both. And Garak's heartbreak is palpable in this moment here. And now, understanding their relationship, you can see, like, oh, he's not just a surrogate father, he is father. And like, oh, you know, how many times do we keep going back to the well, right? And keep getting smacked down. Like, that's part of the human existence, and I feel for Garak here. So back on Deep Space Nine, the senior staff and Dukat are meeting to discuss. Sisko says a Dominion invasion of the Alpha Quadrant will affect Cardassia every bit as much as it will affect us. Besides, we need all the help we can get. The Dominion picked a perfect time to invade. The Cardassian fleet is in shambles. This is the fight with the Klingons. The Romulans aren't much better off. And between the Klingon War and the latest Borg attack, First Contact, Starfleet's spread pretty thin. Of course, the Dominion picked its time well. And help, even with what help there is still 2 days away.
Always.
Always. Seems odd to me. It's tough because, like, the importance of this wormhole, you'd think there would be, like, starships there to protect.
Space is big, yeah.
But space is big. And also, like, okay, let's say they had 5 starships just, like, sitting there in dry dock, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for an attack. Well, they've got more than 50.
So yeah, that's really that's the context, right? So define help, right? Because if you're going up against the entire Russian army and it's just you and you're like, I need backup, and they send Keith, right? I'm not sure that help is how I would define that as help. You know what I mean?
I would not define Keith as help.
In that circumstance, Keith. Many other times, very helpful.
Yeah. That's true. And, you know, they have no hope other than to prevent the fleet from coming through the wormhole, period.
Yeah, and you know what? Last week, that's cool, because last week, you know, we really have come down on Sisko pretty hard about his going too big too soon. But you know what? At least he's consistent, because he's like, you know what'll do it? Blow it up.
Well, but honestly, I have to think from Starfleet's perspective, because they're so remote and they can't, like, have a fleet of ships just twiddling their thumb for years waiting for something that might not happen. They have to know that the, you know, break glass in case of emergency thing is closing the wormhole.
Yeah, sure, it's been discussed. There's protocols in place.
Well, and as we find out here, they've been researching how to do it. Mm-hmm. And not only how to do it, but how to do it without killing the wormhole aliens. And so, you know, I think this is Starfleet's plan. That if they find out an invasion is coming, this is how we protect ourselves. This is what we do. So it makes sense. And of course, for everybody here, it has a different impact. And Kira says, you're going to destroy the wormhole? Sisko says, it's always been a final option. I hoped to never use it. But the Celestial Temple, the prophets. And Sisko explains that they've figured out a way to do it without killing the prophets, but then they're going to be blocked. And Kira objects, but Sisko reminds her it's either that or Bajor becomes the first target. And Dax says, what about Worf? Odo says if we close the wormhole, then he and Garak will be trapped in the Gamma Quadrant. And Dukat, always the dick, smiles and says, casualties of war. Sisko says, then we have 36 hours to find their way. They have 36 hours to find their way home. Let's hope they make it. Yikes. And if you go back in the screenshots a little bit and get the one shot of Bashir, you can see the difference between Alex knowing he's an infiltrator and not.
Yes.
Because that neutral face, that's evil as hell.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And I think that's why they didn't tell him. Because he knows. So we head back to the prison, and Martok explains how Tain was able to send a message out. That these cells used to be self-contained.
Awesome Bond villain lair. I mean, just incredible.
Cool as hell. But there's old equipment buried in the walls, because it had to have life support independently before they built a dome over the whole thing, which I thought makes sense, and it's a really interesting layered wrinkle here, because so many times on Star Trek, they were able to take a communicator apart, or like there's always something behind the wall that they can use to create a transporter, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, the fact that these were independent pods and then they built a dome over it, but the independent pods had to have life support, had to have all these things independently, it makes sense why they would have the technology to be able to do stuff like this. But you rarely see the time linear thought into setting up these situations, that this thing existed, then something else was built over the top of it. Mm-hmm. That I thought that, just thinking not just like this is what this is, but also what was it before, and their steps to it, I think lend a lot to the credibility of the situation here, which I really used to as a mining thing. Now it's a prison. I thought that really closed the wormhole for mm-hmm. me on how are they able to get this message out in a prison, because if it was built as a prison to begin with, there wouldn't be a computer in the wall.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was just a cool little thing. So anyway, Martok explained, we said the walls, and then a Romulan comes in and says they're releasing a friend from isolation, and in stumbles Dr. Bashir. And everybody on the live watch along stares intently at Mike's face. Walk us through your mindset at the reveal of Bashir here.
Well, I thought about how he could have possibly been captured, and then I thought about that didn't make a lot of sense because we just saw him on the station and he wasn't the one that Cisco sent. And then I was thinking maybe it's a flashback, or I started to think about everything else other than, and then it made sense that he said something like, somebody says, when did the switch occur? So literally, this is one of those times where like excessive exposition actually helped me, because I needed to get my head straight, because I was not expecting it.
Oh, it's very startling. The visual cue that they give that I think is really helpful is he's still in the old style uniform.
Oh, yeah. I didn't pick that up either, but that's cool. That's interesting. Unique.
Which allows us to, he says it's been about a month, but allows us to put in our time frame when this happened, mm-hmm. because it's between the ascent and whatever's after the ascent, which means that looking back on it, the first time in the Cisco Vision episode, where the first time we see the new uniforms, Bashir says when Cisco wakes up, hey, do I look brighter to you? Referring to the uniform, mm-hmm. but that also is the first time we see the replacement Bashir on screen. Asking kind of, do I look different to you?
He does brain surgery on him, too.
He does brain surgery there. So it was really fun to watch Mike slowly put it together what has happened, because it's not just, we have a replacement Bashir. The real mind F is realizing we have spent a month with a replacement Bashir and had no idea.
Yeah, and the people on the station still don't know. That's the other thing.
They still don't know.
Right.
And that is not resolved yet. So Bashir, still wearing the old style uniform, confirms he is who he says he is.
He also delivered the O'Brien's baby.
Delivered O'Brien's baby. And also really think through the consequences. Odo's goo baby. Mm-hmm. He was helping Odo with this baby changeling as a changeling.
Yeah, man. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot going, and so you begin to wonder, was he a part of making that happen? Who knows? So he explains that he's been on this prison planet for over a month, and both he and Martok were abducted and replaced and brought here very quietly and secretly. Terrifying, because anybody can be abducted and replaced at any time. And Martok is despondent that his replacement caused the death of countless Klingons in the war. And Bashir says, I can only imagine what my replacement is up to on the station. And Worf says, I've been thinking the same thing. We have to escape and warn Captain Sisko before that changeling carries out his mission. And we, of course, cut to replacement Bashir on the station, who now is scary as opposed to regular old Bashir. He gives O'Brien and Dax some sandwiches. Now it's suspicious. And they have been working for 16 hours straight on retrofitting the station to close the wormhole.
And a pickle?
Yeah, it's a pickle there. And in the stage directions, which got cut from the episode itself, Dax has a line where she says, pastrami. Looks like a delicious pastrami sandwich.
I see a pickle, and I don't think I see pastrami.
Oh, yeah, it's in there. I see it.
Oh, gross.
I mean, I could go for a Reuben right now, but I'm a corned beef Reuben guy.
Yeah.
But it's like the problem is, like, I when at the Index in our old office, we were in the same building as the Carnegie Deli, which there's no better Reuben in the entire world. And of course it closed, so now it doesn't exist anymore. But once you've had a Carnegie Reuben, the rest of your life you'll be chasing
There's one up across from on 57th Street now.
Not a Carnegie though.
Yeah. It's like a smaller one. It's across from Carnegie Hall.
Really?
Yeah.
When did they put that? It went back.
We was there when I was there a couple months ago.
Huh. Oh, well, that's exciting.
Yeah, there's the one downtown too. I think that one might have closed.
I think that was Cats. Cats is still up.
Oh, yeah. I think Carnegie is still there. Or maybe they were just renovating?
Well, no, because Carnegie closed. It was like a whole big thing. It was like in our building.
I'm just
and it was right there. I mean, it was, so if it's across from Carnegie Hall now, it's only like 2 blocks uptown.
Madison was at 4 Pennsylvania Carnegie Deli. There's one in Madison Square Garden now, Penn Plaza.
What?
Yeah, man.
Well, I know that the business didn't close. They were still doing catering. So maybe they opened a retail again. Oh, that's great.
I have to check on the maps.
Anyways, I mean, it's like a $40 sandwich, but it is worth every dollar.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my God. Anyway. Where was I? Oh, okay. So we cut to Evil Bashir, and he gives the sandwich. Dax says pastrami. Meanwhile, Zial tells Dukat that she's not going to go with him. She's going to wait for Garak. Dukat says, Zial, you have to trust me. Things are going to change on Cardassia. Zial says, what things? Dukat says, I don't have time to explain. You're leaving now. Breadcrumb. Zial says, we made a promise, and so did I. I said I'd wait for him, and I will. Is a promise made to an enemy of your family more important than obeying your father? Zial's silence is all the answer Dukat needs. His face hardens as the stage directions. And he says, very well. Stay here if that's what you want. Stay here and be damned. And I think Alamar's performance of that transition is incredible. Go back and watch this little scene here, because he's pleading with her, and when she's not going to do it, he goes cold and dead, and it is chilling to watch that transition there. So in the prison, a bitter Garak commiserates with the real Bashir. I never should have come here. I should have let that monster die alone and forgotten. My whole life, I've done nothing but try to please that man. I let him mold me, turn me into a mirror image of himself, and how did he repay me? With exile. But I forgave him, and now here at the end I thought maybe, just maybe, he could forgive me. And what did Garak do that needed forgiveness from Tain?
We don't know.
I don't know. Martok then comes in and says, this is your last chance to talk to Tain. So Garak goes to his deathbed. Great scene here. Such good acting in this scene. My God. Tain, only vaguely aware of where he is and what's happening, asks if he has vanquished all of his enemies. Garak lies and assures him he's taken care of all of it. And Tain says, Elam, promise me one thing. I'm listening. Don't die here. Escape. Live. Garak says, I'll do it. Do as you ask, on one condition. Stage directions. Garak hesitates. He looks over at Bashir. Whatever he has to say, he doesn't want Bashir to hear it, but he doesn't have the luxury of waiting. I think the stage directions in this episode are phenomenal. It's more like a novel, but as an actor, to have that information, it's so good.
Well, it's also like, it's savvy smart too, because especially now, stage is one thing, but especially on television, we're in the 5th season, right? So by this point, I'm sure a lot of shorthand takes place, right? Where you make assumptions on how characters will play things. And not only that, but you allow for some grace. These people have developed these characters, and so you let them do their work. For the most part, I would imagine. But in episodes where you, the creators, are writing, and you want something specific, and you don't want to spend 3 hours saying, hey, don't do that, I love your choice, but I want this instead, you put it in the stage directions. Because there's no arguing with the stage directions.
That's right. And especially in TV film, the writer has much less power and control than in theater.
On set, at least, yeah.
On set, because in TV film, director is king. In theater, writer is king. And stage directions are very important. And actors hate them. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you need to override that.
Yep.
I don't think it was necessary here, but it's really good color. So Garak continues, that you don't ask me this favor as a mentor or a superior officer, but as a father asking his son. You're not my son. Father, you're dying. For once in your life, speak the truth. It says here in stage directions, again, Tain tries to show no emotion, but he's too weak to pull it off. I should have killed your mother before you were born. You've always been a weakness I can't afford. Oof. Garak says, so you've told me many times. Enabran, listen to me. All I ask is for this moment you let me be your son. Tain stares off into space, torn. Finally, after a long silence, he closes his eyes. Elam, remember that day in the country? You must have been almost 5. How can I forget it?
It was the only day.
It was the only day. Oh, such a good line.
And I love that they're like, and that's all you need. Let Garak's their performance of it make us not know exactly what took place on that day, but we know the weight the day had.
Yeah. And he continues, I still see you on the back of that riding hound. You must have fallen off a dozen times, but you wouldn't give up. I remember limping home. You held my hand. And the last thing that Tain says in this universe is, I was very proud of you that day. And with that, Tain gives himself a private smile and dies.
And so you can read an analogy into it, right? Like, here's, once again, he's not giving up. He's not giving up wanting him to admit it's his son. He's not giving up, and I think that's the illusion that that Tain is giving him.
It's fascinating. And it could mean so many different things.
Yeah, really.
And the last stage direction is, there's no tears, but for a moment, Garak wears the face of that little boy. And you see it.
And
you see it.
Because he makes him that promise with the caveat, and then I'm assuming they're going to attempt to break out of prison here and follow through with the promise. So he must have gotten what he needed from that little side.
Yeah. Well, he does. I mean, in his own sideways way, he admits that he is his father and that he loves him. Just in the most Tainish kind of a way. So back on the station, Kira announces that their last listening post in the Gamma Quadrant is dead. The invasion fleet is minutes away. It is time to close the wormhole. But, of course, they press go and a particle beam fires up and starts zapping the wormhole. Dax has a moment where she realizes this means she'll never see Worf again. Ouch. But, of course, there is a spark and the beam starts fritzing off. It's failed. Someone sabotaged it. Wonder who? Then, gulp, the wormhole opens and out flies dozens and dozens of Jem'Hadar warships.
It's a great table set, Keith, but I have one more screenshot.
Okay.
this whole episode leads us to what can only be described as
yes.
That's what I feel is in store, baby.
Woo! But of course, we are to be continued. So before we do our closing show, this is a great. We had an old segment on our old show called "What Does Mike Think's Gonna Happen?" And I feel like this is a fun moment for us all to ask the question: what does Mike think's gonna happen next week?
Well, I mean, they got to break out, and I was interested for a Worf, Garak buddy cop scenario, but it turns out we're not going to get that. It feels like we're going to have like special forces, Worf, Garak, and Bashir fighting their way out. As good as this episode is.
But wait, what about the big one?
Oh, the invasion?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying, Keith. That's where I'm going with this is, as good as I think this episode is, and we will sing its praises shortly, the next episode has to be incredible, right? If this was great, that means that has to be incredible. And I've had no one tell me that prepare myself to get let down. And so my anticipation mounts with this could be an all-timer. So I'm pumped. I don't know what's going to happen, and that is the best place to be. I can't even speculate. I mean, I hope we all live, but I don't know. They've faked the funk on me before. So I'm not sure, Keith. We can't deal with next week though until we deal with this week. And so
that's right.
I guess we should go ahead, and I'm looking for the button because it got reset when the power went out.
You can do it.
Here. Digga-digga-digga. Digga-digga-digga. Digga-digga-digga.
Okay. So, in Purgatory's shadow, were there any wormholes for you?
Well, I mean, I guess you'd have to go. We talked a little bit about the sort of, are we screening for these things? But I think we've established that the founders are so far ahead of us and advanced technologically as well as sort of in their espionage abilities that we just can't. I think that's the worst part of them, right? Is that we just can't get a read on them. We just can't figure them out tactically, and we can't prevent it. And that is.
And you also have time, right? Because if you remember, like in our lifetimes, right? During the Cold War, we're old. We remember the Cold War, and so we were always like, the Russians are going to attack. The Russians are going to attack. Russians are going to attack for 40 years, and you're like, I'm ready, but like it might be you're still kind of caught flat-foot, and so you're prepared for some things, you're not prepared for other things. You think it's coming, you don't know when it's going to come, and then at some point you stop like waking in, the first thought in your head and the last thing, or post 9/11. Like another terrorist attack. For years, it was the first thought in the morning, the last thought at night. But eventually, it stops. You start living your life again, and it's going to happen again. And you're going to be both, I knew this was coming, and completely caught flat-footed.
Yep.
And I think that's sort of what we're dealing with here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, all of the above. All of the above, Keith. Yeah, so outside of that, I don't really have some. I'm sure we could go back and watch some of the previous episodes, but I feel it and try to find some Bashir wormholes, but we haven't done that. I haven't done that, and so I don't really have much. I mean, there's probably some stuff in Cial too, but nothing. No, answer's no, Keith. What do you got?
I mean, other than Cial's worm face,
yeah,
her face constantly changing. No, I think like there are tactical things that I would wonder about, like why are we sending a runabout with Worf and Garak? Why aren't we sending the Defiant?
Okay.
That has a cloak,
yeah.
right? But I also understand, like, sometimes it's, even with a cloak, they're probably aware of what the Defiant's doing. That's going to attract a lot more attention than, like, a little runabout and a couple people. So it might help you be under the radar. Why they didn't have the tech ready to close the wormhole. But again, it sounds like that was recently developed. And so, maybe they were close to finishing, but they weren't finished yet. So there's nothing here that really, I think, rises to the level of a wormhole proper. I think it's pretty tight.
All right.
Let's talk best moment.
So, oh man, there's so many good moments. There's so many good jaw drops. But I think I'm going to go with, the obvious, the Garak and Tain scene for a variety of reasons. But so many times, I think greatness comes in what... Remember, Keith, it's the silences, the friends you made along the way. It's the things you don't say, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes the best things you say are the things you don't say. And this episode had a lot of lore to put onto us and had a lot of great scenes. But in that scene, so much storytelling is done without over exposition. We get a beautiful scene about riding on some horse in a field somewhere, but that's just a picture, right? We have to read between the lines to interpret what that picture means and what it means to Garak. And so much of that is... And listen, the reveal of him being his son isn't even that, at least thus far, doesn't have that much grave consequence. I mean, it explains...
It's not super surprising.
Yeah, and it explains his undying loyalty, although I attributed that before to just the Obsidian Order and how they kind of did their thing, which made just as much... I mean, holds just as much weight if that had been the truth. But the way that Robinson plays it and the way that the scene is shot and written, it carried weight, right? And I don't have to care, but they make me care, which juxtaposes well, because one of my criticisms that you'll hear in a few moments is I don't feel that weight with the Dukat Sial stuff. I know you loved that one scene, and I guess I'd have to watch it again, but the whole thing to me was just kind of like, we've done such great father-son stuff over the past 4 weeks, over the past month of episodes, basically, that just felt very trite to me. But that is for the later conversation. The scene, Garak, Andrew Robinson, Tain, played by Paul Dooley, all of it just excellent, and it's the best scene.
Yeah. I for me, and remind me, I have thoughts on the Zial thing for when we get to wormholes. No, I mean the stem bolts. Yeah. I think for me, it's not a scene. It's the reveal, right? The reveal of Bashir, and Martok to some extent. That, and it's not even so much Bashir getting replaced, right? Because like he's already been replaced briefly, right? It's that the thought process put into not making this a single episode arc, but it's the thought implication. Yeah, it's not a scene. It's the thought experiment and the implications of we've been seeing a fake Bashir for 4 episodes. And that was always part that I thought was just really interesting and fun, and we've never seen this on Star Trek before. And it's like, whoa, it retroactively changes the context of all of these things that have happened, and it doesn't feel tacked on. Like it's like, yes, would it be great to have like the clues a little bit here so we could Sixth Sense it? Sure, but it doesn't feel tacked on. It makes sense based on the storytelling that we've told, and that this is their tactic, this is what they would do. And then to think through the implications of, so Bashir's going to go back, and all of his friends have had this relationship. I mean, like O'Brien, right? The birth of his son with Bashir, and the talks that they had late night thinking about that, and not only was it a fake person, but this Bashir never had those talks.
Yeah. Never
had these moments, never did these. And so like we dealt with this like a little bit when we had our O'Brien replicant for like a week. But where everybody else knew and he didn't, and this is the reverse. Or when
he was in brain prison, right? And then he came back and he had all of the weight of that experience, but no one else did.
Right. And so you think, so for when people interact with him, assuming he gets back, it's going to be like, wait, did I have that conversation with you or the fake you? And
And how baller is it from a production standpoint, right? Because most shows probably rightfully make the decision to, well, let's let them know 4 episodes before that he got swapped. So we have that dramatic tension that carries us through when we watch every scene going forward. But they didn't want to do that, right? They wanted to plant the switch. And this is in a day and age where TiVo wasn't the thing. So it wasn't like you had the opportunity to go back and track it through. You just got the rug pulled and it was what it was.
And I think it's scarier as a result. Because you're right. If we knew he was a fake through those 4 episodes, it would have added tension to each of those episodes. And I think it would have been very, very interesting. But it's a little bit scarier now where we are.
Yeah, it puts you in the shoes of our heroes.
Yeah. And it gets it also adds to the storytelling moving forward. Because we've planted that scene. That seed. And so for everything moving forward, you just, the paranoia builds, and this show has done a great job of building that paranoia, with the scenes on Earth and Paradise Lost and all that kind of stuff. It's very like the paranoia now is like times a million, and it's really fun. So that's my best moment because I think about it a lot, and so it was a moment like I thought about you experiencing. And I was very protective of this spoiler because I didn't want you to miss out on that.
You did a good job.
All right, let's do some stem bolts.
You get some stem bolts. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
The unfortunate thing is that we've had the power outages and such has made it such that I am now strapped for time, and thus I will be, probably as a benefit, I will be more brief than I generally am. I love this episode. It is one of the episodes and an example of why we can be PO'd sometimes when they're lazy, right? Because when they write and they plot and they pace this effectively, you come up with a near masterpiece. Great character work all across the board. We got to see everyone in this episode. All of our major characters have agency. They have a role to play. Might not be big, but it doesn't matter. You see where all of the pieces slot into the puzzle. We get some tour de forces by all of our guest stars, by all of our main cast. Even Worf gets to show incredible wit and then be a tactical master, or at least in the early stages of. Just great stuff. And even Sisko doesn't even have a lot of lines. You see the gravity of every situation on his face at every time. We got reintroduced to our fear of the Dominion, of the founders of the Jem'Hadar are badass again. Because the Jem'Hadar have kind of been up and down a little bit, but now they're just scary again, which is cool. Everything was great. I don't get this, what we're doing with Dukat and I don't quite understand. It's not that I don't understand it. It just doesn't, I don't know that it's necessary, right? We have so much other stuff that I don't know what role it serves in this particular spot, but I'm not going to judge too harshly because I don't know where it's going.
Where we're going. That's right.
So, as a table setter, I just don't think, and it introduces so many ramifications and plot points, I don't know that you can do better. I do not know that you can do better. This would be an incredible season finale. Good,
you know what I mean?
Because that's the kind of cliffhanger you like, right?
Oh yeah. No, I mean this easily could be our season.
But it's not. It's the middle of the season. 10 more episodes. I love this episode. I think it's gonna be up there. I want to leave some icing on the cake. You know what I'm saying? 96 self-sealing stem bolts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm right there with you, and I think we can be brief on this because we've only seen the first half, the first part of this story. So there's a lot that it's sort of, you have to trust that they're going to follow through, trust that they're going to make it all worth it, right? But yeah, so I think, obviously I love this episode. It's a fantastic episode. It's one of those iconic, like, oh my God, this is different than any other Trek kind of a moments here. I'll briefly touch on the Zial thing because I agree with you. I think I share that problem. I think that up until this point, Zial is more of a concept than a character, she like represents innocence. She represents something. She's a reference point for Dukat, for Kira, for Garak, but she doesn't have a heck of a lot of like character to herself. She's more like a flower in the wind, you know what I mean? And I think that it would be stronger if she had more of her own agency and thoughts and feelings. And in a little bit, it's a female character written by men, and I think it hurts a little bit for that.
We had presented her at one point where, despite all of the kind of like evil shit he did to her, kind of not like putting her away and then potentially killing her, and all
grew up in like a slave situation,
but yet she still had a love for him, and she was pursuing him in a sort of way, and that dynamic was interesting to me. But then here they kind of try to flip it and give us the like teenager, I'm gonna date the bad boy, I'm not listening to my dad
the bad boy
type of thing.
I'm gonna date the gay drama teacher.
Yeah, none of it sort of like you're also sort of like Garak sort of let her off easily. I was like, what promise did you make exactly? None of it sort of really matches up.
Yeah, so I think that if there is a weak spot in this episode, it is still ZL has not been fleshed out yet to finish that. But numerically, I'm right there with you. I write down 96 before you said 96. So we will see what happens next week with the episode By Inferno's Light. If you're wondering, where does In Purgatory Shadow show up on the IMDb rankings? It gets an 8.7, which puts it as number 12 out of 173, almost cracking the top 10 episodes of Deep Space Nine.
Feels fair.
Where will next week end up? I can tell you, they're going to be real close to each other on the list. So here we go. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/KNM. If you did listen to the podcast version of this, please leave us a rating and review. Helps other people find us. We very much appreciate it. So excited to get to next week's episode By Inferno's Light. We are right in the meaty center. It's fun. Everybody stay safe in these weird and dark times. We'll see you back here next week with another episode of Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.
Alrighty.
Okay.